רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטירוף, אין מי שישמור עליי, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שרה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. ביי טוב. רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטירוף, תשמור עליי, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שרה. מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. ביי טוב. רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטירוף, אין מי שישמור עליי, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שרה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. ביי טוב. רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטירוף, שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שרה. מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. ביי טוב.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Michael Hoffman and I'm President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Federation is dedicated to providing Jewish Palm Beach with connections to Israel. We're proud to be bringing you tonight's Yom HaZikaron program, which is part of our annual Israel Days. It's tough to visit Israel right now, so Israel Days is bringing to you a variety of online and in-person opportunities to connect with the Jewish homeland. I invite you to check out the fantastic schedule at jewishpb.org/Israel Days. We will have events ranging from an Israeli dance party to a virtual race through Israel to intimate conversations with Holocaust survivors. During Israel Days, we celebrate the vibrant culture, land, and people who are ensuring a bright future for the State of Israel. We also commemorate those who have given so much to make all of it possible, and that's what tonight's program is all about. We will meet Harriet and Mark Levine, whose son Michael was a lone soldier and who was tragically killed by sniper fire in the Second Lebanon War. And we'll honor all of those soldiers and victims of terror who lost their lives so that the Jewish people can realize the age-old dream of living in our ancestral homeland. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Shikma Araki Cohen, Chair of the Israel Days, to tell us a little bit more about Yom HaZikaron.
Thank you, Michael. Every year on Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, Israelis remember those who fell while protecting their country and those who were victims of terror attacks. The entire nation remembers its death and expresses eternal gratitude to its sons and daughters who gave their lives for the achievement of the country's independence and its continued existence. In Israel, Yom HaZikaron commences nationwide with the sound of sirens proclaiming a 2-minute silence, during which all activity and traffic cease. Flags are flown at half-staff, and memorial ceremonies are held throughout the country. Ending at sundown, the somber reflective mood of Yom HaZikaron gives way to joy as we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. This transition emphasizes the lasting tie between the sacrifice of the country's fallen and the continued existence of a vibrant and a dynamic state of Israel. As Yitzhak Rabin of blessed memory said, Israel has an important principle. It is only Israel that is responsible for our security. Every day, but especially on this holy day, we embrace the fallen sons and daughters and all the bereaved families who have sacrificed so much. May their memories be a blessing. And now, it is my honor to present 3 distinguished rabbis from our community who will lead us in prayer.
Good evening to all those who are participating virtually. I've been extremely fortunate to have been to Israel 5 times over the past 7 years. One of the times was in the summer of 2018 with our very own federation. What a fabulous trip it was. I can't wait to get back for another visit. Please God, hopefully soon. Each time I visit Israel, I am struck by the sight of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds donning the IDF uniforms as if that's such a normal thing. Yet, as an American, it is anything but normal. Without exception, every single person I have traveled to Israel with takes notice of the difference between an American college-aged kid and an Israeli college-aged kid. We all have great admiration and are in awe of every IDF soldier for their commitment and dedication and for the responsibility that comes with it, especially at such a young age. I want to share with you one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. There was a young man who attended a yeshiva in Jerusalem where he spent his days immersed studying the Torah, the Talmud, and various Jewish texts. One day, he approached the dean of the yeshiva, one of the great and revered sages of the previous generation, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he asked if he could take some time off from his studies to travel to the north, the HaGesher region, as we're all very familiar with, to pray at the graves of the righteous. Rabbi Auerbach's response was jaw-dropping. He responded, "You need to travel to the north to pray at the graves of the righteous? When I feel the need to pray at the graves of the righteous, you know where I go? I go to Mount Herzl. And I pray at the graves of the holy soldiers who fell in the sanctification of the divine name of the Almighty." This story encapsulates the very essence of Yom HaZikaron. In conclusion, as we commemorate Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance, we must be mindful, grateful, remember and honor all of the fallen IDF soldiers that gave their lives, their blood, sweat, and tears to help defend the Jewish people and the state of Israel. May their memories be for a blessing.
El Malay Rachamim, Shochen Bam Romim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tacha Chadfei Hashchina, Bamalo Kedoshim V'Toharim, Kazahar Akia Mazhirim, L'nishmot Kol Ele, Shehiz Karnu Hayom, L'vracha, Shahachul Olamam, B'Gan Eden Te Menuchatam, Ana Baal Harachamim, Hastirem Beseter Kanefecha Leolamim, Yitzror Bitzor HaChaim Et Nishmotehem, Adonai Hu Nachalatam, Vayanuchu V'Shalom Amishkavotehem V'Nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, who sacrificed themselves to establish the state of Israel, or who have perished in its defense, or who died in acts of terror. In their memory we pray, may the memory of their bravery, their dedication, their innocence be with us throughout time. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they be remembered with honor, and may they rest in peace at your right hand forever, as we say, Amen.
Welcome. It is a tremendous honor and great privilege that I have the opportunity to be here with you, albeit virtually, as we remember all of Israel's fallen heroes, its soldiers, civilians, all those who died for Israel's freedom, for our independence, and for our beloved state. We pray today, as we offer this prayer, Yizkor Elohim et nishmot banav giborav. May God remember the souls of God's heroic children, the fighters of Israel, of the Israeli Defense Forces who fell in the wars in Israel, in defense, retaliation, and security, and during the fulfillment of their duty, including the souls of the underground fighters and brigades who fought in the national struggle, all those who sacrificed their lives for the sanctification of God's holy name. And with the help of God, the Lord of Israel's campaigns, they brought about the revival of the nation and of the state, and the redemption of the land and in the city of God. They were quicker than eagles and stronger than lions, as they volunteered to assist the nation, and they saturated our holy land with their pure and innocent blood. The memory of their self-sacrifice and heroic deeds will never disappear among us. May their souls be bound up in the bond of everlasting life with the souls of Abraham, of Isaac and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, and with the souls of the other heroes and martyrs of Israel who are in the Garden of Eden. Zichronam livracha. May all of their memories, may all of their deeds always be remembered as an enduring blessing, as we remember on this day of Yom HaZikaron.
Thank you, rabbis. Michael Levin, of blessed memory, was the personification of the word hero. Born and raised near Philadelphia, Michael grew up in a traditional, loving Jewish household. He was active in USY and attended Camp Ramah in the Poconos. At age 19, he followed his dream of joining a frontline combat unit in the Israeli Defense Forces. So he immigrated to Israel in an elite paratroop unit. He was killed by a sniper in the southern Lebanese village of Aita Asha'ab, the first paratrooper and the only American to die in the 2006 Second Lebanon War. Now, please welcome Michael's parents, Harriet and Mark Levine, and Rabbi Scheiner, to our virtual stage.
Good morning. It's really an honor to be joined this morning with Mark and Harriet Levine, the parents of one of the most renowned lone soldiers who has given his life for the state of Israel and defending the Jewish people. Michael Levine of blessed memory. Mark and Harriet are members of Palm Beach Synagogue, and it's been one of the honors of my life to get to know them and hear their personal story of their beloved son Michael, whose memory and legacy continues to inspire countless young men and women to go make Aliyah and serve in the IDF, to selflessly sacrifice for the protection and the security of the Jewish people, and to keep the vow that our grandparents made, never again. So I'd like to say good morning to Mark and Harriet.
Morning, Rabbi. Good morning. Good to see you.
Where are you zooming from?
From our home in Philadelphia.
Okay, very nice. So why don't we begin by you taking us back to the story of Michael, the young boy who became the young man, who became the national hero of the Jewish people.
Michael is a twin, and he has an older sister. And from a very, very young age, Michael had his eyes always on making Aliyah and going to Israel. And I think a big part of it was both of my parents are survivors of Auschwitz. And my father used to talk to Michael a lot about his stories. And the older Michael got, the more he realized how important it was to have a Jewish homeland, that this could never happen again. He went to Camp Ramah in the Poconos. He went to a high school program in Israel. And with each step, he became more and more entrenched in going to Israel. Mark would take him around in his junior year to look at colleges. And I knew that he wasn't going. And when it was time for Mark to send the donation, the tuition payment, Michael said, "No, I'm not going. I'm going to Israel." And Michael went, not knowing a soul, not speaking Hebrew, but he went with his whole heart.
Spending the first 2 nights sleeping on a park bench.
Wow. He literally didn't know anyone.
No.
Not at all.
Well, what was your conversation with him like when he said, "I want to go to Israel and serve in the IDF"? First of all, were you surprised? And second of all, what did the conversation sound like? Did you try to discourage him? Did you encourage him? Were you proud? Were you disappointed, perhaps?
Well, you're going to get 2 different answers. Harriet and I have agreed to disagree on this. Why don't you go first?
I went to Israel for the first time on our honeymoon in 1973 and absolutely fell in love with the country and always had my heart there since then. And Michael was like fulfilling my dream of being able to do something for Israel, not just write a check. So Michael always had my full support. I always told him he was my ticket out of here. At least it was a great excuse to go and visit him several times a year. So I was behind it 100%.
Harry and I are both passionate Zionists. We've loved Israel. We've been there many times. And my feeling was that I did not want Michael to go. But it has to do with my upbringing. My father was a decorated combat veteran of the Second World War, fought for 3 years in the South Pacific against the Japanese. And according to him, he went through the worst of the worst. My father-in-law, who I was very, very close with, even though there was about a 90-day survival rate, if you got into Auschwitz, into the camp, my father-in-law was there for 26 months and again went through the worst of the worst. And I spent 10 years of my life writing a book about his memoirs there. And it's because of the sacrifices that my father-in-law made that we could enjoy the fruits of our liberties here in this country. And my father always said to me growing up, he says, "I fought enough for me, for you, and for your unborn son." And 1966, 67, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, every night we'd have the news on. We had a little black and white TV in the corner of the kitchen, and we watched those casualty reports come in from Vietnam. How many killed, how many wounded, how many missing in action. And my father said to me, he says, "What I went through, I don't want you to go through." He says, "You're not going to know Vietnam." So I grew up with all this, even though I never served in the army, never went through a war. I knew as best as I could the horrors of war. And I did not want my son to experience that. When it's war, it's kill or be killed. And that's it. So one day, just before Michael made his final decision, because we had some conversations about this, he said to me, "Dad, you don't want me to go, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." And then the hardest thing I ever had to say, I barely got the words out. I said to him, "But this isn't about me. I've made my decisions in life. This is about you and your feelings and your future. And if this is something you feel like you want to do, you need to do, you will have my total and my complete support. And from that day on, he did.
Wow. Well, I've seen the movie A Hero in Heaven, which I recommend for everyone to see. One of the most inspiring documentaries about the life of your beloved son, Michael Levine. And that movie continues to inspire countless young Jewish boys and girls. I had the honor of standing with you on Yom HaZikaron at the grave of Michael when Mount Herzl was filled with tens of thousands of Israelis, and young boys and girls kept on flocking up to you as you stood by your son's eternal resting place, telling you with tears in their eyes what Michael's inspiration means to them. But in the video, I saw one of the proudest days of your life, and that was the day that Michael was inducted into the Israeli army. And if you could tell us a little bit about the unit he was in, how he got into that unit, and what it meant for you, what you were feeling and experiencing as you watched Michael receive his beret and his Bible as he was officially inducted into the Israel Defense Forces, fulfilling a dream of his life.
I don't think I've ever had a prouder moment in my life to see that. It was just sealing a commitment to Israel, being a child of Holocaust survivors, listening to the horrors, listening to my parents screaming with nightmares in the middle of the night, to see Michael defending this country. I don't even have words to describe how my heart was bursting with pride, not only for me, but for Michael and the happiness that he had. Michael blossomed in Israel. He was never so happy in his life as the couple years that he lived there and doing what he was doing. His friends always said he never complained in the army, that he pushed people on, that he just did everything with such love and passion. The times that they went on 50-mile hikes, Michael didn't complain and kept saying, we can do this, we can do this. So there is just nothing but pride in me.
Mark, which unit in the IDF did he join, and how did he manage to get in?
There were
Something.
the three main paratroop brigades in the IDF, 101, 202, and 890. 890 is the one that was started, I believe, by Ariel Sharon in the 50s, and that's what Michael was in. He was in 890. It's an elite unit, and I still remember the day he called me, that it was tryouts for the paratroopers. He was finishing his basic training, and I think he said there were 250 soldiers that were trying out for the paratroopers, and they were going to take 25. And Michael told me that he called me, and for the first time ever in his life, I heard that concern in his life for the tryout. He said to me, he said, Dad, he said, these guys are so big. He says they could have me for lunch. Michael was only 5'4", 116 pounds. Wow. After he ate. So he was very, very concerned about making the cut. And I said to him, I said, son, listen to me very, very carefully. I said, I feel sorry for those other guys. And he said, what do you mean? I said, in any competition, and that's what this is, the worst thing someone can do is to underestimate the rest of the competition. I said, they're going to take one look at you and figure, what is he doing here in this tryout? I said, but they don't know the kind of condition you're in. They don't know that you can run marathons, you can run circles around them. I said, 2 or 3 days from now, when you're doing that, when you're running circles around them and pulling them out of the mud and carrying their weapons for them, I said, do you know how disheartening that's going to be for them? I said, I feel sorry for those other guys. After that long tryout of several days, Michael was one of the 25 chosen.
I want to share something with you, Rabbi, that I've never shown to anyone else. As Mark said, Michael was in the paratroopers, and he got me this statue of a paratrooper. You can see the red boots holding the Israeli flag. And on the bottom, he wrote, if I can get through this, to believe in miracles is to be a realist in Israel, which was Ben-Gurion said. And then he wrote to me, thank you for always encouraging me to follow my dreams. Love, Michael.
Wow.
And never shared that with anybody.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us today.
Including me.
But wasn't his height or his weight an obstacle for joining the paratroopers?
Yeah.
How did he overcome that challenge?
Of course, with sheer determination and guts, and he was in great shape.
But there was an amazing story I recall in the film of how he managed to get his papers. Can you share it with us?
Michael had been waiting weeks, even months, for his, I don't know, his induction papers, I think they're called, and they never came. So he went down to the induction center to find out what's going on. And he goes up to the front door, and there's 2 armed guards there, you know, with M16s. And he comes up and he says, I need to get in. And they said to him, papers. He says, well, I don't have any papers. That's why I'm here. I need to get in. So they go back and forth, telling him that he can't get in without papers. So they shoot him away. And Michael goes off, sits down under a tree, not too far from the building. And he's looking at the building and he sees that all the doors and windows have bars on them. You know, there's no possible way he can get into this building. So he walks around the back of the building. There's a driveway there. And he looks up at the second floor of the building and he sees that there's no bars there. And there's a window open about 6 inches. So he looks across the driveway there and he sees a trash dumpster about 40 feet away. So he goes over to the trash dumpster and he gets the back of it and he pushes it as hard as he can until it starts rolling, and he pushes it across the driveway up against the building. He climbs on top of the trash dumpster, gets his fingers up into the windowsill of that second floor, picks himself up, pushes the window open, dumps into the room. It's a men's room on the second floor of the building. And he picks himself up, brushes himself off, walks outside, walks downstairs, finds the appropriate room, walks in. The man says, next. Michael comes in. He says, papers. Michael says, I don't have any papers. He said, son, you can't get through the front door of this building without papers. And Michael said, what makes you think I came through the front door? And he told him the story of how he gained entrance to the building. And the man says to him, you know, I've been here for, I think, close to 20 years. And I believe you may be the only person to ever break into this building to get into the army. He says, sit down, we'll fill out your papers.
He fit right in Israel because that's the most important criteria, and they respect that in Israel.
Yes, they do.
So tell me, what year was he officially inducted into the paratroopers? What was the month and the year?
2000 and
late three, or maybe the late fall of 2003. He served in 2000.
Summer of 2004.
Okay. And then when the war broke out, can you tell us where Michael was when the war broke out and which war it was and what happened from that point on?
It was the Second Lebanon War, and Michael was actually home for a month on leave. Lone soldiers get a month off after a year's service, and he came in to attend a wedding. And I would find him in the morning asleep on our living room floor in front of the TV because he was watching Israeli news all night and making phone calls all day back and forth to Israel. And he was so torn about the war and being here and not in Israel. And finally, he just said, I can't be here anymore. And he went back. And when he got to Israel, they said, you know, Michael, we don't need you. stay where you are, go do some volunteer work in Hebron. And he said, that's not why I joined the army. I joined to be part of my group and to defend Israel. And no one would tell him where his unit was until Michael, being Michael, just drove everybody crazy and was relentless. And somebody finally told him, and he showed up at the border to join his unit. And they asked for someone to lead their group in, and Michael volunteered.
A couple things that Harriet skipped by is that when he was coming back to Israel, his unit was already briefed and was transported north to the Lebanese border. So when Michael came back, they said, well, you kind of like missed the group, so go to Hebron for guard duty. And Michael just argued with them, you know, I'm not going to Hebron for guard duty. That's not why I joined the IDF. And then when he finally hitchhiked and walked and finally got back to northern Israel, he found his group, and his commander said to him, what are you doing here? You don't have permission to join us. And they got into an argument, and the commander gave Michael a specific task. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to stay here and do this, and you're not joining the group. And they argued and argued, and Michael said, you have a choice. He said, either I'm coming in with this group, with our group, with the brigade, with the company I've been with for 2 years now, or I'm going back to the United States. And finally, after arguing for so long, the commander just threw up his hands and gave up, and he said, okay. Michael was relentless.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you got that terrible call. And tell us what happened at that point and your decision where Michael should be laid to rest and coming to his funeral.
As far as Michael, where to lay Michael to rest, Michael had told me on his way back when we were at the airport at Kennedy, and he said, Mom, if anything happens, he said, I want to be buried in Israel at Har Herzl. That's my home, and that's what I'm fighting for. I was actually at work when the rabbi from the synagogue here where we belong and the consul general of Israel came in and called me into a room with my boss to tell me. My older daughter happened to have, she was an artist, was doing work in the same building. We called her up and told her, and then went to the camp where Michael's twin sister was working. And then we drove home to be able to tell Mark and flew out the next day.
It took Harriet and I about 30 seconds to decide where Michael should be laid to rest. Within 30 seconds, we knew what we had to do. Just to honor his wish.
You think he had a premonition the way he told you what his final wishes are?
I can't believe that you asked that.
Well, most of our friends don't know what we're about to tell you. But after Michael's passing, one of Michael's girlfriends, he had several in Israel, said, I want to tell you something that you don't know. Said that Michael called me and sort of told me that he wasn't coming back and so on and so forth, you know, and eventually said to her, well, you know, people that are going into combat, you know, sometimes have a feeling, you know, they're concerned, they're afraid, they have a premonition, you know, it's not unusual to hear something like that from a soldier. And she said to us, no, you don't understand. For the past 2 years, Michael had a dream that he was going to be killed in combat. Not only a dream, the same dream over and over and over and over again. Harriet and I had absolutely no idea. Now think about this. Someone who had an idea a premonition that he was going to fall in combat. When the war broke out, Michael was home on leave. He was home for a couple of weeks. When the war broke out, the first 2 weeks of the war were an air campaign. There was no troop incursion into Lebanon. It was only an air campaign. Knowing the way Michael felt about Israel, he was compelled to go back, despite the fact that he had this reoccurring dream for years.
Wow.
He still fought his way to Israel to find his unit and argued relentlessly with his commander to go in with his troops.
Unbelievable. Ironically, he was laid to rest on Tisha B'Av, the saddest day, the day of national mourning for the Jewish people, symbolic of the fact that the Jewish people mourned his passing collectively, a great loss, a hero of the Jewish people, remains a hero till today. Tell us about landing in Israel and coming to Mount Herzl to the funeral of Michael.
That's your story.
Well, we were just concerned about having a minion to say Kaddish for our son. We really had no connections, no people that we knew, maybe a few in Israel.
We knew Tiki.
Yeah. And when we arrived at the cemetery, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people outside the cemetery. And my very first thought was, great, there must be 5, 10, who knows how many, 15 funerals going on. The war was still going on.
There were people up in the trees.
It's going to be crazy in there. When we got inside the cemetery, there were thousands and thousands of people at the burial site. Little did we know that Michael's funeral was the only funeral that day, the only one. And people came from all over Jerusalem. It was a fast day for the religious, Tisha B'Av, and they walked from all over the city. They found out that there were loudspeakers that were mounted on cars and trucks going through the city, saying that a lone soldier from Philadelphia, a religious boy, gave his life and was being buried that day.
How did that make you feel?
I think for me, it was almost full circle when Michael had come home from Ramah one summer, and we were talking about different holidays, what our favorites were, and Hanukkah with all the presents, and mine is Sukkot. And Michael said Tisha B'Av, and I said, how can Tisha B'Av be your favorite holiday? You fast, it's such a solemn day. And he says, no, he says, because he says of the significance that the first temple was destroyed on it, the second temple was destroyed on it, and all the other things in Jewish history that all happened on Tisha B'Av. And then to be buried on that holiday that meant so much to him, to me, was full circle.
Wow. And you said that when he came to Israel the first 2 nights, he had to sleep on a park bench because he literally knew no one. And then you come to his funeral and there are thousands and thousands of people who have come to know him, love him, honor him, and respect him, and admire him as a hero. What, over a course of just a year or two, and what did that say to you?
The groundskeepers tell us that his kever is the most visited kever in the entire cemetery. And you've been there, you know what it looks like, something between a junk heap and a flea market. People don't know what to leave of themselves, but they leave a piece. And when we're there, people tell us that they've made Aliyah because of Michael, that they've joined the army because of Michael, they've joined the paratroopers because of Michael. And we never thought that his short life would make such an impact on people.
But more important thing I want to mention is that every Friday when Michael was in uniform, we would call him. It would be around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. late mid-afternoon in Israel. We call him before Shabbos, and we'd speak every week for not 15 minutes. He was usually on guard duty, and it was a great conversation. But during every conversation, invariably he would say, I'm having this problem. I need my Hebrew's not as good as it should be. I need some things translated and I don't know who to go to, or I need a fax machine and I can't find a copying center, or next week is Super Bowl Sunday and I'm off and I'd love to watch the game, but I don't know where to go. And it was just a little thing like each week, nothing monumental. And I would say to him, well, just, ask around, Michael, Nishkafel, no big deal. Ask around, you'll find out. And it's little things every single week. Well, finally, after about a year and a half in uniform, Michael had this epiphany, connected the dots and said, you know what, if I'm having these types of problems and facing these types of challenges as a lone soldier, my guess is that all lone soldiers are. What we need, and he went to a friend of his who worked for the Jewish agency, who did what he could to help lone soldiers. He went to him and said that 1 year from now, when I finish my service, he says, you and I are going to start a lone soldier center, an organization just for lone soldiers. And Michael laid the whole thing out for him.
Wow.
He was a dreamer. He was a visionary. He knew the need for an organization like this, formed by former lone soldiers who had made Aliyah and are staying in Israel, run by former lone soldiers, programs created by lone soldiers. And about a year after Michael's passing, this individual, along with other former lone soldiers and our help, started a lone soldier organization in Israel. Now, there were a lot of people running around in Israel back 15, 20 years ago doing what they could to help lone soldiers, but there was never a national organization.
I have to tell you, I had the pleasure of going to visit the Michael Levine Lone Soldier Center in Jerusalem, and I saw the camaraderie and the friendship and the support and the love and the encouragement that these lone soldiers give each other. And I met once a young boy and girl who were dating. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. They were both lone soldiers. They came from different states, and they became engaged to be married. And they said something that stuck with me forever. They said, when two lone soldiers meet each other and get engaged and then get married, they're no longer lone soldiers anymore. And so there are even marriages in Israel and children being born because of his vision. We have very little time left. I could speak to you forever because your son touches such a steep chord in every soul and in every heart. But in conclusion, I just would like to say to you, knowing your son so well, and it's been now 15 years since his passing, if he could speak right now to everyone listening and convey a message from his heart, from his soul, to the Jewish people everywhere, especially to young people his age, Jewish boys and girls, what do you think Michael would say if he was here to speak to all of us today?
I think Michael would tell them to be proud of their heritage, what they come from, to be proud of Israel, to defend Israel, not necessarily to pick up a gun, but use your voice. What's going on college campuses today and the rise in anti-Semitism. I think that's what he would have to say. You have to defend Israel in any way that you can and be proud of it. Be proud of what you come from.
Yeah,
absolutely. Also, before we go, we want to talk about, if we just have another moment, the Michael Levin Lone Soldier Foundation, 501c3 charitable organization that we ran and are part of here in this country. We raise funds in this country to support lone soldier programs in Israel. There are a number now of lone soldier organizations in Israel, none of which existed, 15 years ago. Michael was the turning point in Israel for that.
There's another one for you to visit when you go next time, Rabbi.
Where?
In Yerushalayim, right near the Shuk.
Wow.
Yeah, but we raise funds to support those organizations. They send over grant requests for us. that we evaluate and send over, funds to support their efforts. They do everything they can to help lone soldiers before, during, and even after their service in Israel, because there are.
Where can we find more information on that? Is there a website?
Absolutely. Michael Levin, lonesoldier.org.
Okay, and what about the movie or the documentary, A Hero in Heaven? Where can people access that?
Same place if they go to that.
Okay.
I think it's also on YouTube, but if they want a copy, same place.
Okay, well, in conclusion, I just want to say to you, Harriet and Mark, that everyone knows that Michael Levine is a hero of the Jewish people. But I want you to know you are also heroes of the Jewish people, because you raised the son with that love and passion and devotion to Israel, and your sacrifice is as great, if not greater. Not to measure sacrifices, but the sacrifice you made is immeasurable. And we are, on Yom HaZikaron, we remember all the soldiers, and we honor you, and we honor the memory of your beloved son, Michael, but may it bring some measure of comfort knowing that he lives on today in the hearts and the minds and the souls of countless Jews. And one of the most beautiful experiences I had was when our synagogue hired a former lone soldier, Steve Kaplan, to be our personal security guard. And he discovered that you are members of our shul, and come to shul. And he couldn't believe it. He said, I want to meet his parents, because the reason I made Aliyah from South Florida and joined the IDF was because I was inspired by Michael's story. And he pulled out his wallet and he took out a picture of Michael. He says, I've carried this picture in my wallet for years now. He is my inspiration. So you and Michael have literally transformed the lives of so many Jews, and he lives on in spirit, and his neshama is a part of all of us. And may God comfort you, bless you, your family. May only share joy, love, happiness, nachas. And on behalf of the Jewish people, we thank you. And we, of course, honor and thank Michael. And we pray for a day and age when there will be peace, when young boys and girls will no longer have to make the ultimate sacrifice. But until then, like you said, we all have to be inspired by Michael in our own way, whether it's literally going to the army or standing up for Israel in many other ways that we can stand up. And one of the ways we can do that is by supporting lone soldiers like Michael, and going to your website and supporting the Michael Levine Lone Soldier Foundation. And may his neshama yehi zichro baruch, his neshama and his memory should always and will always be a blessing. And I'm sure Michael on high continues to send his love and blessings to his family first and foremost, but to the Jewish people everywhere.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing you back in Palm Beach soon, God willing.
עולות בלבב פנימה נפש יהודי הומייה ופתי מזרח קדימה עין לציון צופיה עולו עבדה תקוותנו התקווה בשנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים. עולות בלבב פנימה נפש יהודי הומייה ופתי עין לציון צופיה. לא עבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בשנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.